Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Machine Guns in Your Movies podcast. I'm Sasha.
And I'm Joel.
And we came to the machine guns part of our podcast, part of the name. Now, today's movie we're going to discuss is Death Wish 3 from 1985, if I am not mistaken, right?
Yes, it should be. It's actually the other day I was watching this and I kept thinking how interesting it seems to be that it parallels the original Rocky films. Like there was the first installment was in the 70s. This first sequel was in no, actually, that's not quite accurate. The third one was in the early '80s, so but they're mostly around the same age. And there was one in the '90s, the fifth one that's not fondly remembered. And yeah, it's there are some parallels. I thought was kind of amusing, but otherwise they're not as heavily related as I thought it was. But the one in the middle of the '80s in '85 is still very cherished by a lot of people, despite its cheesiness. So. Yeah, no, but it is from '85, and it's normally we'd start with the earlier ones, but Death Wish 3 is an absolute classic. It's by Canon Films, Golden Globus production, and just wonderful cheese from the era.
Yeah. When you see the Canon logo, you know that it will be at least interesting, something interesting, yeah. And this film is directed again by Michael Winner, who did, as far as I know, first two also, the second one also. I honestly don't remember much about the first two. I do remember them being more, especially the first one, as far as I remember. I need to rewatch, the first two, but I do remember them being more gritty than this one. This one is very much the film of its era, and its look, it's I would say more. It's more colorful, more campy, even intentionally cheesy at certain points, I would say. It directed by Michael Winner and stars Charles Bronson again, and it's. I guess we can talk about the story, but the story is basically similar to every movie. Now
You mean
we
the
have. Sorry.
you mean in the franchise, basically? It really is amazing how every time Paul Kersey does anything, somebody close to him dies, and he has to take out a bunch of random punks.
Basically, yeah, that's what happens. He comes to visit his old friend in New York, and his friend is killed by the bunch of the punks, by a bunch of the criminals who are terrorizing the neighborhood. And police arrest him by mistake. They think that when they arrive on the scene, he's there, and they think that he's the one responsible, and they imprison him, and then Inspector Schraker, played by Ed Lauter. He's the one who gives him like a basically proposition that he will let him free if he goes to that neighborhood and takes care of the basically of things here to clean everything, but to let know the police from time to time, and so they can come and arrest some of the gangs, so they can better their image in the newspapers, because it's basically, again, the police is inefficient. There is like this thing, the core element, like that people should take matters in their hands, and they should and that the system is not functioning, and people should simply go against the gangs themselves, and the vigilant justice is the one. That's basically the core element of the film, again, as in the first two films. But here it's much more colorful, and it's much more a film of its era, I would say, that especially different than the first film.
Dear God, the movie was so preachy. This one was so over the top and exaggerated and preachy.
Yes.
It felt like it was a freaking movie in a Ludovico treatment from Clockwork Orange designed to make you hate criminals or something. like they're so one-dimensional and evil, and they exist just to be blown away. It's like I've seen video games that care like from the '80s and stuff like that, where the antagonists and the enemies had more life to them. But that's what makes them honestly. That's what makes the film so charming. I think the one exception to this is Robert. I think his name is Robert, the main. Robert Fraker, I believe, is the character's name. He's the main villain.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, they just like he's one-dimensional evil. He has a ridiculous haircut, and like he does make an interesting antagonist for Paul Kersey. And yeah, also the way as you mentioned, the police are depicted in it, but it's all over the place. Like they do get involved in like one of at the climax when there's the final battle, but throughout the film they're all over the map. They seem to be unable to. They're repeatedly shown to be unable or completely ineffectual against very, very brazen criminal activity, and they seem to be more interested in stopping law-abiding citizens, like the old Jewish couple that Paul Kersey has dinner with. They take his gun and they literally leaves him unarmed. And again, it's very much. It feels like John Milius is the movie's channeling John Milius there, because that very much feels like a point in his favor, but. Yeah, there's that, and it is very much preachy. But one thing I will give it to it is, while looking at the film, there's not much going on to it, but there's a very effective crescendo of thrills and crescendoing and buildup of tension, almost comparable. I wouldn't say it's as good, but it's comparable to what you see in the original Die Hard. There's just this. Although Die Hard's it takes place linearly under a single building, just progressively over a course of several hours throughout a single night. This one takes place in a neighborhood over quite a few days, but there's still very effective crescendoing tension. Like you can tell that Paul Kersey and some of his friends are getting more and more overtly aggressive against the abuse of the criminal gang scum, and it gets more and more intense as Robert makes it clear he intends to take Paul Kersey out and kill anyone who stands in his way, and Paul's not going down easy without a fight. So that is one of the highlights of the film, like a legit good. Some of the movie's ridiculous, but that is one of its legit charms and a well done element of the film, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, yeah. No, the film is very entertaining, and I wouldn't say it's a bad film or that it's badly directed or anything like that. It's director was, I would say, pretty conscious what he's doing, and again, I don't remember much the first two films, but I do remember them being more gritty. But here, the violence, I need to rewatch the first two to compare better. But here, the violence is at least at the first third of the film or first half of the film is more off screen, and is more like when you see somebody hitting someone, it's looks more staged and more like does not have the punch. But later on, as the movie progresses, we have more scenes with when they actually when it has a certain punch, but still it has that frame which. I mean, I cannot take it seriously. Obviously, I mean, and nobody who did the film, I don't think, did that. So yeah, I mean, there is the movie is preachy. I would say that's true, but there's basically there's this public defender, Catherine Davis. She when she talks with Paul Kersey, she when she literally says like I'm sick. He asks her something like, "Do you like your job?" And then she says like, "Yeah, I like it." But then she says like, "I'm sick of this like defending the creeps, the wrong people. People should take things in their justice in their hands and things like that." There's like very much like. It's wearing its message on its sleeve. Yeah, it's sending its message with a post mail. Yeah, as I think John Ford said, it's pretty much the pro and NRA, and very much like everything is shown as inefficient except when vigilant justice. basically.
Would pick up
And
that character has like a few problems, like it just to be just very paper. It's not a well done character. I don't think the
yeah.
performance is too good, but I think the screenwriting doesn't help at all because it's just so paper thin, and it's like she's just basically supposed to be like an idealized audience stand-in who is convinced. It almost feels like an inversion of a Mary Sue, where she's obsessed with how great and awesome the protagonist is. They go out, and she finds him irresistible, and I think I should mention a spoiler warning at this point because we will get into it, but it follows the trend of any person who, especially women, who ever gets near Paul Kersey seem to end up dead. And actually, I think a few of his male friends, as the beginning of the movie tells, makes it clear, those are vulnerable too. But in this one, she dies, and Robert kills her to send a message across in a rather goofy and very cinematic car explosion scene where there's a car crash. And she seems to be an audience stand-in, but it also seems to be no, I didn't think the character was. It's still charming, but it's not a well done aspect of the film. I'd say that's where the movie's interesting. Even when the movie falls down, it's quite amusing, I would say. So there's that.
I mean, it's not there are not much three-dimensional characters in the movie, really, but much of them. She basically, and the way, including her, and the way their romance happens, it's like out of nowhere. It's like she basically jumps on him, and that's it. I mean, and he accepts, it's there's not much. You don't feel anything really. You don't feel really the chemistry between them or anything. It's like she's just there. She's mostly there to be a love interest and to say these lines. But at the same time, I mean the movie is not pretending like they're concerned with that. They're really going for the shootings and for the action scenes and for all these like booby traps and things like that, and that these things are obviously done with the passion, and it's again, it's a very much film of its era. I would say literally like. Did you wanted to say anything maybe else about the characters of the film before?
I don't know if it's character based. It's just something I observed about it I thought was interesting. Apparently, the film was actually shot in London, not in the U.S. It's not. Some parts are very brief parts. It's almost like Jason Takes Manhattan. Parts of it are shot in New York, but the rest of it's shot elsewhere. I always thought it was interesting because Marina Sirtis is in this film. It's an early role. She actually plays somebody of, I think, Latin American extraction, and another spoiler alert, she ends up, as I mentioned earlier, where female in Death Wish characters don't fare very well. She gets raped, and in a rather goofy scene, I think she ends up dying of her rape or something, I think like that. It's just an odd occurrence. It's not technically related. Apparently, she gets her arm broken during the incident, and I think there's a bit of cheapness to it, but also she did not enjoy the scene at all and was uncomfortable and cold. But I thought it was odd that a British actress was hired of Greek extraction, was hired to do this scene. She'd be much more famous to audiences later on, a few years later, when she took on the role of Deanna Troi from Star Trek Next Generation. But in this film, it's... I thought it was odd, but it's one of those several early bird cameos of people that would become much more known later on. Alex Winter's also in this. He starts a legacy that Jeff Goldblum did in the first one, and Lawrence Fishburne did in the second one, where it's an actor who would soon have a much more prolific career, fairly more prolific career, and gain much more notoriety for something else in the film. I thought that was always an interesting feature. I can't remember anybody from the fourth one, but I did think it was funny that all of the street hoodlums in the first three films had somebody would get famous later on playing them.
About these things, what I wanted to mention also, the scenes that there are two one rape scene and one attempted rape scene, and they don't have that much impact, and they felt a little bit, I wouldn't say exploitative, but there's like this element of they're shot as all other scenes, like very in your face, and they don't like later action scenes, and they don't have really impact. And as you said, there's like that element of, first we hear her that she broke her arm only, and then we hear that she's dead, and it's basically like just a reason for him to go mad and then go gung ho even more. And it's like these transitions are not done pretty well. But again, it's I don't think that
not being done well. I think that's one of the issues, is that this movie's quite edited. I could get this feeling watching several times where, like, when Robert kills a guy he suspects of trying to usurp his position, it's edited in such a, you really get the feeling that the MPAA did not like this scene and they chopped it to pieces. The franchise was infamous for this. It was like a vigilante version of Friday the 13th. There's lots of chunks of it, like the notorious rape scene of the maid in the second movie. This one's like very badly cut, and like it definitely shows. So there is that, and that's one of and that is a minor issue. I don't know if there's a full uncut version, but that remains to be seen. If anybody knows, you can let us know.
Yeah, there's one version that I saw, and I haven't heard of other version. I think it was. I guess that's it. I mean, I guess that's the theatrical one, when they were, I'm sure, heavily cut. But there is. When you mentioned it's Friday the 13th, there's that element. Basically, I wanted also to talk about, so that it's a movie of its time in a way. It's there is the thing that I was thinking about all when there's that there's that part of the film where the Schraker gives the proposition to Paul to move into the apartment of his old friends and to take care of things. And literally what came to my mind is the Hellraiser 3. There's literally I was thinking of this is basically like a Death Wish action version of the slasher films, where Charles Bronson, like a Paul Kersey character, is basically a boogeyman, like he's Jason or Freddy or whoever. I mean, it's I thought of the scene from Hellraiser 3 from the nightclub, one of the scenes from the nightclub, where Pinhead basically closed, where all doors are closed, and Pinhead slaughters everyone in the nightclub. There is that basically like meat for slaughtering, and that's it. And that's the and that's also the Hellraiser, where the Cenobites are downgraded, I would say, pretty much into one-dimensional slasher figures in a way, boogeyman figures. And here I had a similar feeling. It's basically like, okay, now Paul is moving there, and he's like having a meat for killing, and that's all, for slaughtering. And I think basically, I mean, around that slashers were that was 1985. Slashers were still pretty popular at that time, and I think this movie basically played on that. Perhaps I would say intentionally too. I mean, it's that is connected with that.
Yes, but I also had issues with one of the other weak points I feel is that that scene where Paul very, very clearly walks into what's so obviously a trap, that it's so obvious. Dude, why would you do that? But yeah, it's obvious that Robert's leading him on. He barely escapes with his life, and he manages to kill several punks. But I thought that was just sort of a dumb decision. It actually feels like, ironically, like a slasher movie, where you think that it's interesting you're mentioning parallels between slasher movies and horror movies, because it's not as odd as you think. It's just that in this case, the victim ends up avoiding, and not because, instead of the woman going off to investigate a woods and getting killed or something, Paul manages to succeed and beat the odds, and eventually even kill most of his would-be attackers. But I thought that was a bit silly a silly choice on his behalf. And but also on the subject of traps, it's interesting that this movie predates things like Home Alone, but Paul Kersey does employ several traps to actually kill. It's very satisfying, but he manages to kill several of the criminals by booby trapping apartments or
Yeah.
rooms across the building, and quite a few of them are very effective. One of them very famously gets two of the front teeth of what a would-be burglar. And
Mhm.
yeah, I thought that was a charming bit of. I thought that was. I really enjoyed that. It just has such a charm to it.
Yeah, and the piece of wood with the nails on it. Yeah, I was reminded as a basically as I guess someone got inspired by the Nightmare on Elm Street in a way, because maybe or maybe not, I don't know, but the later part of the later part of that film, last third, has these scenes with the booby traps and the Nancy and Freddy, and the booby putting on the booby traps. I was reminded a little bit of that with him putting these like nails on the windows, things like that, like a cheaper version of these booby traps from Night from Elm Street. But yeah, I mean, maybe it was intentional, maybe not, but. Yeah, there's also element of the machine guns in this. Literally, he uses the machine guns, which is something that many action heroes in canon films did. I mean, we have like Chuck Norris doing that a lot, Delta Force in many canon movies, and here in the end we have this character of the World War II veteran Bennett, who gives. To Kersey, gives machine gun to Kersey, and he basically, there's that element of there are a lot of the additional members of the gang arrive, and he gets them killed with the help of what's the name of the character? I forgot. The husband of Maria. And he kills them, most of them, with that machine gun, and then the police arrives, and that's big climax.
Have a name. If I remember, he doesn't even have a name. It's just Mr. Rodriguez. Like, he doesn't seem to have
Right. Yeah, he's defined by just being the husband of her and helping Paul. But these scenes are pretty entertaining, and but they're obviously so over the top, and the moment when he gets that machine gun, and it's like now we're going into the canon territory. Really, like this is like a canon film, and that's something that was very entertaining. And as you mentioned at the beginning, the movies builds a certain tension, and I would say it's not boring at all. Obviously, it's very entertaining, and the fact that it has one-dimensional characters and maybe the attitude that I do not agree with does not really mean that it's bad. No, it's a very entertaining watch, and I would say it's it's one of the more. I mean. As I said, I don't remember much. The first two films I need to rewatch them, but as far as I remember, they were different than this one. They were more gritty, but this one is pretty entertaining.
Yeah, this one's just so cheesy and silly. It's so surreal. There's like rape and extreme violence and like a really ugly, disgusting view of urban decay. Yet at the same time, it's so goofy and over the top. It's
Yes.
charming, but it almost feels like a weird inversion of Heavy Metal, the early 80s adult animated film, because it's like, on the one hand, it's a cartoon, but on the other one, it's very much for older audiences, because, this movie feels like a cartoon at times. It's just so silly. I didn't like the way, you mentioned the machine gun, I really didn't like the way Bennett gets his ass kicked when he tries to use it, but for some reason, like, all the criminals just don't decide to just kill him right there. They manage to overwhelm him when his gun jams. But it leads to an extremely richly satisfying final showdown with like extremely high stakes, and it's not always choreographed well. Like some of it's just a bit silly, but it's just very, 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 very fun. It reminds me of that. It's a bit dumb, but it's like the old adage. I remember Herschel Gordon Lewis saying, it's like people will never leave a movie theater because a chair changes positions in a shot. They leave because they're not entertained, and Death Wish 3 has entertainment in spades.
Definitely, and it's not like there's a lot of action, especially in the last part, but it's not overwhelming. Like sometimes the too much action can also become boring and overwhelming in a way that it's becoming like the same thing, and you become bored with that. But here it's not the case. It's very entertaining, and I wanted to discuss the music for a second. I think the music was done by by Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. But as far as I know, this was reused. I checked. As far as I know, this was reused music from his previous score, and he didn't do much on this film.
That's hilarious to think that one of the guys from frickin' Led Zeppelin helped with the score for Death Wish 3. I know it's not technically new music, and he didn't actually do it, but it's just still nuts that this franchise of all things has input from Jimmy Page. It's just the mind boggles. Like, this is a one of a kind film, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's he did for the second one and for this one, and basically for some weird reason I don't remember, but there is a moment near the beginning of the film. There is this kind of drone synth moment, which was kind of creepy, and music. Drone synth music, which is kind of creepy and reminded me a little bit. I don't know if you've heard the Jimmy Page version of the music for Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising. In the end, Bobby Mosley did the music, so Kenneth Anger didn't use the Jimmy Page music, but the music from some bits of the music from the beginning of this film reminded me of that. Maybe he kind of reused some of these elements or ideas, but there's that kind of a drone, creepy synth element. Moments which remind me a little bit, but it's pretty interesting to think of the connection between the Jimmy Page and the Golan Globus production, as they were known in Hollywood as Go-Go Boys. There is that.
It's a brilliant nickname. I love it.
That they were known as that by that nickname. Israeli Cousins. Any closing thoughts on this film?
Not much else. It's just, what is it? Some might be better, but I actually think that if I'm being entirely candid with our audiences, I would say that Death Wish 4 is my personal favorite, but this one's a very popular classic among the masses for a damn good reason. It's just incredibly entertaining and well made. It is there is a bit of there are definitely some issues, but it almost never ever bores you. Even the parts of it that fail are spectacular. So yeah, there's a lot to appreciate with this film. It's worlds apart from our previous episode on Wild Strawberries, but that's kind of why we chose the title of our film. The title of our film podcast. And that's about all I have to say. Get good recommendations from me. I suggest anyway, if you might want to start with the first two Death Wish, but the third one's just very entertaining. It's a hell of a good time.
Definitely, yeah. I would definitely. I would need to rewatch the first two again. Yes, also recommendation from me for this one. It's a pretty good movie to kill an hour and a half, and it's worth of your time. I think that would be it for this episode, and thank you for listening to us, and expect a new episode in 2 weeks.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Enjoy your, thank you for spending your time with us, and we look forward to chatting with you next time. Bye now.
Bye.